everybody, and welcome back to another episode of For the Love of Marketing. Today, we're going to be talking about gamification, this topic I love. What is it? What isn't it as well? We've got the fantastic Betty Adamou with us. Betty is a gamification expert, author, and inventor of research games. If you don't know what that means, you're going to find out. So don't worry, it's all very exciting. Loads to talk about. So welcome, Betty. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, Simon. Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure. Fellow Cypriot as well, right?
Yes. Representing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining. This is a lovely topic, gamification. It's such an interesting space. There's so much you can do with it, but I still feel it's not fully understood by a lot of people in the marketing industry, and certainly not by people outside of the marketing industry. And we have listeners from both inside and outside. So it'd be lovely to get into that with you and just really understand. Let's just kick off with this. What is gamification? And then we'll get on to what isn't gamification. Or you can answer both questions at the same time. Your choice.
Okay. All right. So, well, first of all, great question. And if you're somebody who's kind of heard the term but don't really know what it is, don't feel too badly, because there isn't really a formally accepted definition. Yes, there is a definition that people tend to use, but in itself, it's not overly helpful. So if you were to Google what is gamification, you'd probably find something like, using game mechanics and game elements to change behavior for a positive outcome, right? But if you don't know what a game mechanic or game element is, then you're already at a bit of a stumbling block, right? So my preferred definition, and this is something that I've written about in quite a lot of detail in my book, is that gamification is applying gaming techniques to something that isn't otherwise a game in order to achieve some positive outcomes. And when we think about gaming techniques, I think we all broadly know what that is. So we might think of levels, we might think of progress bars, we might think of rewards, we might think of bonus features, we might think of characters that we can play with and avatars, and even music and sound effects and things like that. So if we think about some of the things in our wallets and our purses and our apps, there's gamification all around us that we're carrying with us every single day. So one of the prominent examples I can tell you about, Simon, is of course when we're going and buying our groceries.
Mm-hmm.
When we're going to Asda, when we're going to Sainsbury's, when we go to Tesco's. Loyalty cards are a fantastic example of gamification because they use a lot of gaming techniques for behaviours that are desirable for these companies. So you'll have the Boots Advantage card, for example. You collect points every time you shop, and on certain weekends there'll be bonuses, triple points, and then you add all those points and you can unlock different rewards. And depending if you save your points and then get a bigger reward later, or spend those points and then maybe get smaller rewards, that's part of that kind of gaming technique. And it's very lucrative. There's data behind that. Every time you're showing that loyalty card and being part of that gamification process, an enormous amount of data is being collected on what you buy, when, how. So gamification nowadays, going back to your question about definition, has become really synonymous with data collection when we're talking about gamification in the digital world.
Yeah, I think that gamification and data collection I think that's a fantastic use case for it. I mean, one of the examples I always give, and again, it's in my books. Let's promote each other's books. Good idea. One of the great ones I've used for a long time is the LinkedIn profile completion status bar, right? And it's actually very similar in Google Ads as well. The recommendations section in Google Ads is very similar to this, in that LinkedIn and Google both very hungry for data, right? I mean, that's one of their primary objectives, is to collect data, because if they collect data, they understand their audience better. If they understand their audience better, they can ensure that the algorithms work to best effect, and that the advertising can be highly targeted to the right people, right? So really important for both those organizations to collect data. So therefore, putting out a progress bar saying, your profile or your page is 80% complete, psychologically we're like, I've got to complete that, right? I need to level up. Yeah, I've got to complete that. So I've got to get that to 100%, right? We love to finish things as humans. So you get it to 100%, but then you look 3 months later and hang on, it's back at 80%, because suddenly there are new fields in there that they've added that now you need to fill in to get that back. And that keeps going. And you never really get your profile to 100% for any length of time. And the recommendations in Google, as soon as you fulfill some, along comes some more. So, I've got to complete those ones. So using those gamification techniques of showing a progress bar and urging you to go and complete it just, for no enormous benefit to ourselves, we go in and we fill in that data to complete it, which is a huge benefit to them, not much benefit to us, but fantastic technique for gathering data. So I think that data gathering is such a great use case.
Absolutely. And if we think, there's two really important points to make here as well, Simon. So jumping on what you were saying about Google and LinkedIn being organizations that want data, they're hungry for data. If we think about brands across the globe now, data is number one priority. Data is the new oil, as people keep saying. And so with that in mind, if we're thinking about gamification as a kind of means to create stickiness and engagement and encouraging positive behaviors we might want to see in our customers, our TV audiences, our research users, whatever it might be. But we forget, I think, sometimes that games in and of themselves are inherently data collection tools, because when we play video games, when we play games on our apps, they have to collect data on what we do and how we do it in order to give us feedback. So when we think about how actually games and data exist very harmoniously already, all we're trying to do as gamification experts is be able to say, okay, well, how can we, outside of games for entertainment, borrow what is so intrinsically engaging about games, apply that to other elements, so we are engaging people, but also ensuring that the experiences people have are better fundamentally, while being able to collect important data as well. And I think done in the right way, it's a win for everybody. So the company wins, the users win, and together there are better, more trusted relationships. Well, that's the hope anyway.
Yeah, that's the dream. Yeah. I think it's a great way of putting it. And it is relevant to pretty much any company in pretty much any industry. And I think I've heard people shy away from gamification in the past because our customers are not interested in gaming. Well, this is not gaming, right? I think is the point that I always make on that point, and that's what I was saying about what gamification isn't. It isn't gaming, right? You don't have to create games. You don't have to have mobile apps. You don't have to have little characters running around on your website or anything like that. People have to tap on to make them go away. Or we're not talking about actually making games, right? It's those psychological elements. So, I mean, have you ever heard that resistance yourself? Of this, we don't need games. We don't want games, or most people you speak to understand that level.
I think by the time people have come around to approach me, it's very likely that they have done a bit of their own research. They've probably heard one or two of my talks or interviews that are online, and they might have had a bit of that aha moment. And so by the time they talk to me, they're open to learn, they're open to ideas. And something that I'm always keen and I badger on about all the time is it really is about what my clients need that reflects on what I design. Am I designing a fully fledged game in which, to the point you made earlier, Simon, there are characters, there might be music and sound effects, you might have a fully fledged, what we might call serious game, but then there are other cases where actually just a few simple gaming techniques, which kind of is a bit more gamification, sort of adding those more superficial elements onto something that isn't a game, that could suffice as well. So for me, working predominantly in the market research space, I might have a client that is experiencing, real survey fatigue. People don't want to do their surveys, seeing a number of drop-offs and things like that. And depending on what the subject is about and who the audience are and how severe those problems are, I might say, Well, in this case, actually, I think we could just add a few more of the superficial elements, and that really should solve your problems. We should see more engagement. We
Hmm.
could have, better data accuracy and things like that. Whereas in other cases, it's a case of going, you know what? Actually, we do need something more contextually driven here. We need something that is going to feel much more immersive, because context is a really big element of gamification. Um,
Mm.
so I think in my work, I might have a game that you're a bartender, and it's a fully fledged kind of bar environment with music that makes you feel that you're there because it's important to the outcome. But
Mm.
that context isn't necessarily important in all spaces and to solve all problems. So it's a tool. Gamification is a tool which is a means to an end. It's about
Yeah.
that engagement. It's about that change of behavior. So if people do come to me and say, well, it's gaming and what's that got to do with my brand? My thing is that, well, it's not about gaming. It's about solving problems and making positive change, and gamification is
Yeah.
part of that process.
Exactly. And so always start with the problem and how you're going to solve it. What are the goals? And then if you can use gamification techniques to help you solve those goals quicker, more effectively, then that's where it comes in. So, well, I mean, you must obviously work on a lot of this and read a lot about it. And I know you do a lot of talking and speaking on in the space as well. So, have you got some examples for our listeners of like really good gamification sort of case studies, I suppose?
Yes, absolutely. Goodness, there's so many to choose from. And it's important to share that gamification right now exists in every industry on the planet.
Yeah.
So there are serious games and gamification applications for training, education, weight loss, dieting, learning new languages, learning any new skill, in fact, for market research in marketing. So it's prevalent everywhere. And so I could share examples in and outside of marketing. And I think, some of the predominant examples are, like I said, those loyalty cards. We're
Hmm.
interacting with them all the time. But then you've also got like things like Fitbit, which lots and lots of people use, and they know it really well. There's lots of examples of gamification within that. There's progress. There's that sense of competition with yourself.
Mm.
It's using that feedback and data analysis to spur you to do more. So that's a really good example there. Duolingo is a really great example. I love Duolingo. And Duolingo is it's about learning a new language, but it does so in a way that takes away that sense of it's a chore, and it makes it fun and it makes it engaging, and that's what all gamification should do.
Mm.
um, in terms of, I guess you could say, more sort of direct marketing, I do have a top 7 examples that I give in my gamification in marketing and advertising workshops.
Mm.
And a couple of my faves from there, Simon, is the Jimmy Choo Catch a Chew campaign.
Love
This is
it.
a real oldie. This is like more than 10 years old. So this is good. It must be even older than that because it predates the invention of Instagram and things like that. So this was back in the day when like people really used Foursquare. Um,
Hmm.
so Jimmy Choo, this was the first time that they were launching athleisure wear. So if anybody knows the brand, it's all about those like dress shoes, high heels, boots. And this was the first time that they were launching trainers or sneakers for your US listeners. Um, but in creating that launch of this new product line, they wanted to obviously go out with a bang. So they had essentially made London into a game board and hid a pair of these Jimmy Choo sneakers somewhere in London. And if you wanted to win a pair of those shoes, you had to find them. But how do you find them? Well, you had to follow the clues. So you had to, religiously check out the Jimmy Choo blog, follow them on, any of their social media that they had at the time. So I think Twitter was around at the time, so you could follow clues on Twitter and, all of that kind of stuff. Um, And they worked with a company, if I remember correctly, called Fresh Networks, which is a marketing company. So they actually did work with a
Mm.
marketing company to create this. But back then, we didn't have that vocabulary of gamification, but it was a game. Um, and what was interesting about that campaign is that sales rose for Jimmy True as a brand 33% daily. So even if people didn't obviously go and find the shoes and win this free pair of shoes, it was a game that clearly created a lot of buzz. It was, a brand that became top of mind for a lot of people. So even if they didn't win, they were obviously still engaging with the brand and buying products and things like that. And what I love about that, Simon, is that it in a lot of ways, it's quite a lo-fi gamification campaign, right? It's just we've hid a pair of trainers and we're giving you some clues on our blog. So that's a really good example of going out with a bang, doing something really great, using gamification, but doing so in a way that is not necessarily going to cost it and doesn't mean that you're designing a fully fledged digital game.
Mm.
So that's a really lovely example that I always hark back to.
Nice.
Um, and the other one is Corbin Run, which I don't know if you might remember this.
No, I don't remember that one not off the top of my head anyway.
Corbin Run, unfortunately, the website doesn't exist anymore, but Corbin Run was a game not created by the Labour Party. So I think this is a company that supported the Labour Party, clearly called Games for the Many.
Yeah.
And in Corbin Run, it's a very kind of 8-bit looking game, and it's like a platformer game. So you see Jeremy Corbyn, the then leader of the Labour Party, sort of going through a street, and he's, dropping his policies, and he's trying to outrun like the Deliveroo bicycles, which are obviously like the symbol of the 0-hour contracts and the gig economy. He's got to kind of swerve around through the ghost of Margaret Thatcher. He's got to go through, Boris Johnson dangling from an aeroplane. So it is a piece of propaganda, essentially, but it's marketing, and it was a really good example of gamification. And it had something like 15,000 downloads within the first few hours of its release, and it was a really interesting use of games for marketing at that time, because politicians were really banging on about students going out and voting, which they did more than ever. And so I'm guessing that one of the pieces of thinking behind that as a campaign is, well, we want to get more young people to vote. Young people are stereotypically interested in games. Let's make a game that gives a bit more of an understanding of the Labour Party's policies, rather than, as you know, going on their website, downloading a long-winded PDF, because that's what all the parties do.
Yeah.
So that's another really good example, I think, there for people to have a look at.
I wonder how much of an impact it had. I'm quite upset that I missed that. That sounds like a fun game.
I
A
did
little
take
bit
a lot of
crazy.
screen grabs. I did take a lot of
Did
screen
you? Yeah.
grabs. Yes, yeah, I did.
No,
Yeah, and
I
it
don't
had
know
a
how I
lot of
missed it.
tongue-in-cheek humour as well, which I think
Yeah, I
always
bet
goes
it
down
had
really
to.
well.
It would have to. I think. Yeah.
Mm.
Awesome. Well, that's great. So let's just take a minute to talk about research through gaming, because I know that's something that you're very well. You're really driving, right? I mean, that's really your baby, I suppose.
Yes.
And if I'm right, that's really what your book is focused on, right?
Yes, so bit of a story there. So basically, I used to work for a survey software company, and this is where the idea of using games to engage people really came about. Ended up writing a kind of semi-academic paper called "The Future of Research for Gaming," and I was something like 22 or 23, presenting that on stage at a conference in Las Vegas, which was very cool. And
Mm-hmm.
so it got a huge amount of buzz, which I didn't expect. For me, quite naively, I was just showing an idea that I thought was cool. It wasn't something that my employer were doing at the time and haven't done since. But then I thought, right, well, I'm going to start this company now. And it kind of made sense to almost like call it after the paper that launched that whole conversation.
Mm.
So Research Through Gaming is a company I founded, I think it's like nearly 12 years ago now. And under Research Through Gaming, I run training sessions and consultation and actually design those gamified applications for all sorts of different customers. So that's Research Gaming. And my book, Games of Gamification and Market Research, is all about helping people understand what, coming back to the first question, what is gamification and how can researchers use it to engage people in online surveys? Because there really is a global issue with market research in that people don't want to do surveys. And when they do, a lot of time, unfortunately, they're button mashing, so we can't rely on that data, and it becomes a very expensive exercise to hire more participants to fill those quotas and things like that. So gamification has been a really powerful tool, powerful methodology, and so my book is all about that.
Nice. Wow, that's really interesting space. I mean, without giving too much away from your book, because you want everyone to go out and buy it, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I hope I haven't read it, Betty. I will get it and I will read it. I promise you. I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure.
Okay.
Sure, it's phenomenal. Yeah, please do. I'm sure it's fantastic. What if you were going to give sort of one tip away to people who are thinking of conducting some research and they are looking out there and struggling to think how they get an accurate result? What bit of advice could you give them about how perhaps they could employ some of your thinking about research through gaming?
Well, I'd give 3 tips actually, Simon.
Go on.
So the first one is to conduct what I call a survey MOT. Now, I actually offer that as a consultation service in and of itself. Mm-hmm. But a survey MOT is where you're looking through the existing survey that you have and you're asking yourself what red flags exist in your survey as it is. And so no matter how much or little gamification you apply, there's actually problems in the way that you're asking questions, and that needs to be solved first. So before you do anything else and try to make things fancy and more engaging, whatever, the fundamental foundations of your survey have to work. Mm-hmm. So when I've done survey MOTs, and I've worked with research agencies that have been around forever with really talented and knowledgeable researchers, but for a myriad of reasons, they may have inherited a survey from somebody who wrote it years ago, or they're just really pushed for time, or they're so involved that they can't look at it with a fresh eyes approach. Is look at your survey and see, where are my questions really unclear? Where are they really confusing? Do I make a lot of assumptions in my survey that mean that people are not able to respond accurately? And by that, I'll give you some really clear examples, Simon. So I worked on one very recently that asked people what their work status is, and that's a question that's in almost all surveys. Mm-hmm. And so you have the normal responses. So, I work full-time, I work part-time, I'm a carer, I'm a student, and the list goes on. And then one of the options is disabled, not able to work. And that's a red flag, because you're assuming that because somebody is differently abled, they're not able to work. There wasn't an option to say I am differently abled and able to work. So if you fit into half of that category as a participant, you're sort of, well, I don't actually know how to answer this here, because I might work full-time or part-time, but I'm also differently abled. So things like that can be really triggering to participants, actually, as they would do with any user. But then you've also got scenarios where we've got things like an ethnicity question. And again, ethnicity questions exist in most surveys. And there was one example I worked on recently where, again, it's single choice. You can only answer from one of these options, where you could say under a heading Asian/Asian British, you could select, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, and so on. But then under black, you didn't have black British. It was black, and then you could only choose black British, black African, and so on. And so there's a difference there between how Asian people were able to respond or how black people were able to respond. And again, that's a red flag. So I could apply gamification all day long to a survey that has got these issues, but we have to sort the foundations out first.
Yeah.
So that's the first tip I'd give, is do a survey MOT. Make
Yeah.
sure there's no ambiguity, lots of clarity. If there's any red flags, iron those out. The second thing I'd say is play games. It is remarkable how many people are really interested in gamification. Again, by the time they've spoken to me, they might have read up on it, but they won't have played a game, since they were maybe like 10 years old. And games have really evolved so much since, I'm assuming we're a similar age, Simon,
No
elder
comment.
millennials, I think we're called.
Since
So
back in the day when
back
we
in the
used to
day,
warm our houses with fire, yes.
yes. So
Yeah.
games have really moved on since then, and
Yeah.
I think it's really important for people to play games and take part in gamified activities. So download your Lingo, download a Fitbit, look at apps like Noom, which use gamification for dieting, Couch to 5K, all of these, and take inspiration, have a look around. So that's the second tip I'd give. And the third tip I'd give is define what success looks like. Because if you don't know what problems you're trying to solve and what success looks like to you, you will struggle to not only find the best design approach for your gamification method, app, website, whatever it might be, but actually on the other side of things, you'll find it really difficult to measure, well, did this project go well? Because you've got no benchmarks. So those are the three things I'd say up front. And then read my book is the final thing.
Yeah, read the book. Read the book. That's the most important one. Yeah, I think that point about purpose is really important. We don't start with I want to do some gamification. Where can I fit that in? Start with what problems do I need to solve, and can I use gamification to solve those problems? I think it needs to be that way around. Everything should start with that. What is our goal? What's the problem we're trying to solve? So I think that's critical. I think it's great advice on going and playing games. Thankfully for me, I'm a big gamer, and I have been since about 1989 or something. So before most people listening were born, I imagine. But anyway, so I think that does help. It honestly does. As much as our parents always at that time told us that stop playing games, it will never help. It does help enormously, actually, to think about what games are doing and what we enjoy and what psychological effect that's having on us, and how we can apply that in marketing. Definitely go and read your book. We've only got literally 1 or 2 minutes left, Betty, but I wanted to ask you about the Not Sorry Club, because I've seen it. I've seen you involved in it. I have no idea what it is. Tell me all about it.
Okay, so the Not Sorry Club is all about encouraging women to live unapologetically full lives. So women, as you probably have seen over the years, Simon, especially British and Canadian women, I find, say sorry a lot. And words are powerful. So even though going sorry can ask a question, sorry can I share an idea, that does something to us psychologically, where we're kind of shrinking ourselves, shrinking to fit expectations. And I think when I started the Not Sorry Club, the more I spoke about why I wanted to start it, I would hear so many women say, oh my God, that's me. I'm always apologising and I'm a serial people pleaser. So the Not Sorry Club initially started as an Instagram account with, things like quotes and things like that, stories that were very, very personal to my own experience, but has really evolved. So there's the Not Sorry Challenge, which is taking, a bit of gamification there. So start breaking the habit of apologising unnecessarily, take the 1 week Not Sorry Challenge, completely erode that word from your vocabulary for a week to start building up that habit. And also events. So there's an event called Unapologetic, and that's a more kind of discussion-led event about why we apologise and how we can build confidence. And then there's another event called The Importance of Celebration, and that really deals a lot more with things like imposter syndrome. So lots of successful women who might have books and awards will still go, oh, I don't think I'm really good enough for that. And so when something good happens, I don't tend to celebrate their success, but it's really important. So that's a bit about the Not Sorry Club. And there's a podcast, Tales of Female Badassery, now in its second series that's being recorded now. And so these are stories from everyday women who are doing brave, unapologetic things, still with threads of kindness and empathy, which I think are really important. And on the note about empathy, Simon, I just wanted to say one more thing, because I know we're running out of time. There is a huge need, I think, for any gamification designer to have empathy with their audience. And of course, we know in marketing that brand experiences are a really big thing. And I think if you can have an idea of how you would like your users, your audience, your participants to feel in those experiences, then that's going to make you a much stronger gamification designer and experience designer. So trying to build that empathy muscle is really key. I think that's a bonus tip that you didn't ask for there, Simon.
Love it. No, love it. I think, yeah, look, I'm a big fan of using of understanding psychology as a marketer. I think it's a critical and undervalued area, and I think having empathy is a key part of that. And I think that the work on the Not So Club, I think, is fantastic. And yeah, encourage everyone to go and follow that podcast, and of course everyone to get your book, Betty, which I'm going to do literally in 2 minutes. I'm going to go out and get a copy of that as well. So look, it's been amazing, Betty. There's so much to unpack from that. There's some fantastic tips on gamification generally, but also using it in research, what you're doing with the Not Sorry Club and the podcast. But yeah, understanding what that really is, setting your goals for what you want to achieve, and understanding how you can gamify that with those brilliant examples you gave as well. There's so much for people to take away from that. Hoping I can come along to an event and hear you talk at some time in the near future as well. So let's do that. But thanks so much, Betty. It's been amazing. Absolute whirlwind of masterclass. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Go and find Betty and follow her as well. And Betty, thanks for joining us. And we'll see everyone soon.
A pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.